session on careers in the life sciences. Although all of our interns are working at life science companies this summer, I think they're getting an in-depth look at their own teams, but they may not be getting a chance to interact with professionals in other areas of the company. So I hope that through today's conversations and networking, that you get a broader look, interns, at the diverse jobs within the city. We'll start with a look at a few CEOs and their career paths. First up, Gerard Hill, part of this year's intern class, will speak with Aoife Brennan, CEO of Synlab Therapeutics. Welcome, Aoife and Gerard.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and also good morning, Aoife. So today we'll be interviewing you. So sorry, introductions. Hi, I'm Gerard Hill. Right now, I'm attending college at Northeastern University, studying mechanical engineering. And this summer, I've had the pleasure of being a business development intern at Triple Ring Technologies. So thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed today. My questions are going to be directed towards your career path. Now, just quick, small little note. So I have 3 questions. We're really just going to try to get through 2 of the questions because we have until 12:10. So we only have 8 minutes, but hopefully we can get through all 3. Thank you so much. So if you're ready, I can ask the first question.
Off you go.
Okay. So the first question. Is it the current career path that you're on right now? Is it the same path that you foresaw yourself taking when you were an undergraduate in Ireland?
Yeah, that's a great question because I'm actually in Ireland right now. I'm in the bedroom that I grew up in right now, as it turns out. So you can see. So it's funny because when you go back to your hometown, often you start to kind of think about, you know, the years you spent there and what you thought. And I can say for 100% certain that I never imagined that I would be living in the US and be a biotech CEO ever. You know, I'm a first generation college graduate. I had you know, I didn't know any scientists or physicians growing up. I didn't really have any role models in, you know, high school. I really loved kind of math and problem solving, so I was very much drawn to the sciences, but there wasn't really anyone in my ecosystem or in my kind of family network that I could reach out to for advice around, you know, here's some of the things I'm thinking about. And similarly, I went to a Catholic boarding school where there wasn't really a tradition of you know, encouraging girls to pursue careers in STEM and in mathematics. You know, I think my career guidance counselor recommended I do teaching because she felt that would be a great flexible lifestyle for somebody who was clearly on the path to, you know, being a great wife to somebody someday. So I never imagined that I would be where I am. So I think that's the short answer is no. Never thought that I would do this path, but you know, continuing to follow things that were difficult and interesting and stretch myself, I think has led me to where I am today. And there was no real path. It was just pursuing things that were interesting and motivating to me and that were difficult, and not listening to people who, you know, were giving me advice that I felt was potentially holding me back, and just continuing to push forward, I think was great. And a mentor told me early on in my career, it's far more difficult to stop somebody than it is to deny permission. So, you know, sometimes I think you look for permission, you're looking for reinforcement, you're kind of asking, you know, may I, do you think I can? But actually it's much more difficult to stop somebody who's decided, hey, I'm going to do this. And it requires much more effort. So, you know, I think that's been something that I've tried to remember throughout my career.
That's a great answer. Honestly, super inspiring. I know there's been times where I've been told that I should do something else. And I decided to go against that, and it's been nothing but positivity that has followed. Thanks for that answer. So we're going to go on to the second question. And I think this is a really interesting question. So we already established that you were not born here, you were born in Ireland. And I went through your LinkedIn, and you've attended school and college in Ireland, and now you're a CEO in America. I'm right?
Yep.
And I guess the real big question that a lot of people here who weren't born in the US might have is essentially, how did you like go through the world? Like mainly, how did you build a network? How did you build a network in essentially the professional atmosphere when you weren't born here? I guess it's a good question to ask.
Yeah, number one, what I'd say is it's really, really challenging. You know, you're right. I did my college education in Ireland, and I always felt like a second-class citizen here in the US. You know, you kind of went to this med school no one has heard of, and you know, you always, you know, when you're training in medicine, you're called an FMG, which is a foreign medical graduate, which almost kind of puts you in a different class, you know. And so I always felt like I had to prove myself. You know, at every stage, I had to be, you know, more dependable. You know, not waffly. If I committed to doing something, I always felt like I would, you know, go above and beyond to meet my commitments. And I think, you know, I'm not a natural born networker, but I do think that, you know, being up for things, saying yes to, you know, volunteer opportunities or, you know, extra work or those side projects is really how you build an authentic network. So once you've been in difficult situation with someone, once you've been working professionally in a project, kind of what we call being in the foxhole with somebody, right? Where you're in this difficult situation where you had a challenging project, you had a study that was on the rocks that you had to get back on track, or you're in a difficult kind of setting where, you know, senior management in the company were against you and the team had to come together to fight for resources to get a project going. Once you've had a series of those interactions with somebody where you've been a real team player, where you've put the team above your own personal interests, where you haven't played politics, where you've just been a really good roll up your sleeves, let's succeed as a team. When you've been in that situation with people, I have a group of people that I know I can call any day of the week and they will be 100% there for me because we've had that experience together. And that's what I think builds the right kind of network, because it's deep, it's not superficial. And I know 100% that those people, if I call them and say, you know, I need advice on something, that they're going to give me a very truthful answer. Or if I need, you know, a background check on somebody they've worked with, they won't just give me the kind of politically correct thing to say, you know, they'll really give me their honest opinion. And I think that's, in biotech, that's the currency of this industry, right? Of really having those genuine connections with people, I think is just really, really important.
Thanks. That's a great answer. Yeah, essentially, from just building connections and people, like just working with people. And it's just, I guess that, yeah, that's just the best way to make those connections that are like really strong and don't break. Awesome. So this is a little bit early and it looks like we're going to get to our third question, which I actually is one of my favorite questions. This one's going to be a bit shorter, I feel like, though. So you're a CEO, as we've established already. So what do you feel like is your leadership style? Like, how do you like to lead? Are you like, you know, a firm dictator, or are you like, you know, a more like passive person? Like, what's your leadership style?
So I'm kind of, I don't know if you guys are into the personality types yet, but my personality type is ENTJ, right? So I'm an extrovert, which is both a strength and a weakness. I think how that shows up as a leadership style is I like to think out loud, I like to brainstorm. And that can often lead to confusion, you know, around, is she making a decision? Is she just, you know, kind of thinking out loud? How does that go? But I think as a leadership style, it shows up as, you know, I want to be collectively talking through pros and cons. And as a group, you know, I don't go off into the woods and make a decision and then come out and announce to the rest of the team. You know, I want to be able to hear pros and cons and different people's opinions. But then the NTJ part means I also want to reach a conclusion and get to a decision. So I think that's kind of how I hope I show up, is collaborative, but also decisive when a decision is required. And not that doesn't resonate with everybody, right? There's some people who want to work with somebody who has more direct style, which is, you know, this is the path and, you know, there's no conversation about it, but we're moving in that direction. But I think the people who gravitate toward me are the people who like to be involved in the discussion and to kind of see the decision-making process and to work together as a team. And that's hopefully how I show up as a leader.
Awesome. Also, just to let you know, yes, we did get through the personality types, so we all definitely understood that part. So yeah, Awesome. We got through all 3 questions just on time. Thank you so much for your time today. And I think Lila will take it from here.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Gerard and Aoife. Next up, we'll hear from Frank Lee, CEO of Forma Therapeutics. Jessica Fong Eng, an intern this summer at Pure Tech Health, will be his interviewer. Welcome, Jessica and Frank.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Frank. And thank you, Lila, for pronouncing my name perfectly correct. My name is Jessica Fong Eng. I recently graduated from BC with a degree in computer science and biology. And thank you so much, Frank, for agreeing to be interviewed today. And I have a few questions about your career path and some sort of like work-related culture problems that I think I saw it myself in my previous internship as well. So my first question is, especially early on in your career, did you have any trouble with cultural barriers? Like, do you have any ways like need to break them down? Frank, I think you're muted.
You know, at my company, I think the ante is now up to about $40 that we have to contribute to the jar every time you're on mute and you start talking. So anyway, Jessica, thanks for the question. Early on, it's interesting. I think there were some barriers both in my family and also my professional life. You know, growing up, I'm from South Korea originally. I always like to say I'm born and raised in the South, and I say South Korea. But there's some truth in the South because a lot of the time early on was in Tennessee, and you might hear an accent every now and then from the South. You know, growing up in my household,
there's mad people, low key, 102.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there was a lot of when I talked to my parents about, hey, you know, what should I be when I grow up? There was really no question about it. You're going to be a doctor, and if you don't like that, you'll be a lawyer. And if all else fails, you'll be an engineer. You know, there was no thinking about other kinds of career paths, and absolutely there was no thinking about would you be a business leader at some point in your career, right? And so there was a little bit of a barrier just from my own upbringing initially about where I would focus my time, and you know, eventually I decided engineering would be the path, and I got to the point where. After about 4 or 5 years of engineering, I thought, you know, I have an interest in maybe running a business one day and seeing other parts of the company. And at that point in time, it was going to be very difficult because I could tell that, you know, once an engineer, you're always going to be an engineer. And, you know, at that point in time, it wasn't very common to see business leaders who were of Asian descent. I couldn't pick one in the company that I was in at the point in time. And so I remember walking in one day and the head of engineering sort of was looking at me saying, hey, Frank, looks like there's something on your mind. And what are you thinking about? And I told him, I said, hey, you know, I'm thinking about doing some other things, but I'm not sure how to do it. And he gave me some good advice. He said, look, why don't you sort of remake yourself a little bit, go to business school. And we really like you here. We want you to come back, but don't come back here. They sponsored my first year of business school, but they said, look, don't come back here. We like you. Go to a different company where they're going to see you as a business person and not an engineer. Because if you come back here, they'll always see you as an engineer. Okay. And so I thought that was really good advice from a person that I really respected. And that's what I did. I went to business school, went to a different company. You know, I was fortunate enough to be in contact with other leaders, their mentors during my career, who helped shape sort of the business skills that I needed, leadership skills, because it is something that's out there even today. You know, when I show up in meetings, it's automatically Dr. Lee, and you must be head of research, right? And when I tell them I'm the CEO and I'm not a doctor, it takes them a little while to register, and I have to keep repeating that you don't need to call me Dr. Lee. So anyway, that's a little bit of the sort of background in terms of maybe some cultural barriers, both professionally and in the household as well.
I think I definitely just have this recent conversation with my parents about not being a doctor and not an engineer and not a lawyer. Definitely can relate, and then it sort of get heated conversation.
Yeah, they also tell you, well, they should just go to Harvard. They only know Harvard. Every other school is, I don't know.
You recently mentioned that people mostly see like PhD or like MD as being CEO or like head of research, and how did you portray yourself to your coworkers and to other people that you hold a different degree, but like you show your presence? I'm not sure if that question makes sense.
Yeah, it is. And so there are certain expectations, right, of leaders, at least back then and probably some today, which is you'll be a little more extroverted, et cetera, et cetera. I'm naturally an introverted person. I'm a closet introvert. I've had to be somewhat extroverted because people want to know what's on my mind. They don't want to have to guess what Frank is thinking. And so I've had to make some adjustments, because naturally I'm fine just talking to a few people, and that's good for me. But when you lead larger and larger organizations now, people want to know what you're thinking. They'll be observant. They'll be looking at what you're wearing that day and how you're walking, who you say hi to. And so, yeah, you've got to be able to communicate in a way that is authentic, is transparent. And so along the way, what I tried to do is take those kinds of assignments that would stretch that part of my skill set. So, I remember coming out of business school, after a stint in business development, I had a good talk with a mentor, and he said, look, if you ever want to be in general management, you need to go in sales. Go out there and carry the bag. And when I told my parents and my colleagues that, from business school that I was going to go carry the bag after getting an Ivy League MBA, and they said, are you out of your mind? What are you doing? What are you doing? But I did that because I wanted to see up close what it was like to interact with customers and physicians, and it also helps to hone those kinds of skills, communication skills that honestly I don't think I had at that point in time.
This is the last question before we wrap up. Is there a decisive moment that you convinced that you need to go to business school? Because you started with engineering, and then it's like, hey, I will go into business. Is that a moment at your career you say, yes, this is where I need to go?
Yeah, well, it sort of gradually came to be, but I remember it's probably about third or fourth year of me being in engineering. I'm a chemical engineer by training originally, and I just felt like I was starting to hear more and more of engineers who were 20 and 30 years in the industry, a bit cynical about the company and their opportunities. And I said, I never want to be that. I never want to be that. I always want to be the one that's optimistic about what we're going to do together, work towards something that's exciting. And so that was kind of an eye opener for me that, I don't want to be here 30 years from now being in that kind of an environment. So I think that was one of the first moments. There were probably others, but and I was fortunate enough at that point in time where I had an opportunity to be on many engineering projects and see them from start to finish. So I kind of felt like I've sort of been there and done that and wanted a new challenge. And so that's been sort of the common denominator for me, is just looking for new challenges, new ways to learn. And that's what, I'd say I'd encourage you to do is if you ever have a chance at those kinds of things, go for it, particularly early in your career.
Thank you very much. I think one last question is, since you talked about that you were being introverted and then you took on task to develop your communication skills, I guess a little bit more extroverted. So what is your leadership style right now?
Well, I've been psychoanalyzed many a times by a lot of people. So I'm an analytical driver. I'm red, blue. I'm an ISTJ. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I'm a lot of things, but one of the things I learned over and over again is you have to invest in people, get to know people, build trusting relationships. That's about being authentic, making time for folks, and being inclusive, hearing all the voices around the room. And that's what I'm really big on, is to make sure that as a leader, you're actively bringing people into the conversation. And someone once told me, It's diversity is sort of like having a sort of an eclectic group of people at a cocktail party at your house. Inclusion is about making the cocktail party feel warm and inclusive and welcoming, if that makes any sense. So, and that takes an active approach. And every time I've done that, it's paid off for me, because what's true is there are so many good minds in the room, and collectively you're going to accomplish a lot more than by yourself.
Thank you so much, Frank. I think our time is up and Lila will take over.
Thanks, Jessica. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Jessica. Finally, we have our last CEO interview. We have intern Jessica Senkis interviewing Nabiha Saklian, CEO of Seleno Bio. Welcome, Nabiha and Jessica.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Nabiha. My name is Jessica Senkis, and I go to Boston University majoring in communications with a minor in business. For the summer, I'm currently working at Moderna as a corporate communications intern. So Nabiha, thank you so much for agreeing to interview today. I'm super excited to get to learn about your career path. One of the first questions we have is that as the CEO of Seleno Bio, I'm curious on, what was the story to starting your company, as a young female CEO? What obstacles did you have to overcome? Who mentored you, who helped you? I'm very curious about that.
Nabiha, are you muted? We can't seem to hear you. You're muted now.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, yes, headphones died, sadly, but very nice to meet you, Jessica, and so excited to be in this group today. Thanks so much for being here and hearing our stories. Really nice to see Aoife, who's been a wonderful mentor to me, and very nice to meet you, Frank. My story, so I'm a physicist by training. I've always been a physics nerd, and ended up doing a PhD, was at Harvard for my PhD, very grateful to have that opportunity, where I joined a laser physics lab because lasers are cool. But I also started to dabble in biology. I was very curious, could we do something useful in biology with lasers? And I started engineering living human cells with lasers. And the biologists I talked to were amazed at the idea. It's mainly because scientists are always looking for ways to make biology more precise. Biology is inherently very complex, very rich. And sometimes cell culture can feel a lot like cooking, where you stir some chemicals, you heat it, you see what happens, mix it up, try it again. In contrast, lasers are super precise. You can target one individual cell in a plate of millions. You can target them at super precise intervals, every second, every minute, every hour. You name it, we can do it. So that was my journey towards converging into biology, and what a fantastic journey it was, because I was surrounded by incredible collaborators who saw the potential of the technology and encouraged me to pursue entrepreneurship. I wouldn't have considered it otherwise, but my personality is very entrepreneurial, so I like to take on tough problems, not afraid to knock on hundreds of doors. I'm not afraid to hear no most of the time. So it really fit the way I am in my everyday. So that's how we got started. And, the first thing I did was build a team. I brought in my co-founder, Marina Madrid, her and I had this amazing working relationship for years. And yes, we're, two women physicists of color, very rare, who also were starting this company. Then I also really wanted to work with somebody with more experience. So met Matthias Wagner, who's been a serial entrepreneur. So I think having this balance of first-time entrepreneurs and people who have done this many times before is quite magical. So leaned into it. Matthias was super enthusiastic. In the second meeting, he said, can we work together? I'll build the prototypes in my garage. And if nothing happens, I'll keep the lasers. I'll buy some lasers and I'll keep them. I said, great, that's a fantastic deal. So having those people bet on you early is so, so critical. And I've had dozens of incredible mentors in the Boston biotech community that I've learned from. And they've been pivotal in shaping the direction of the company, the product market fit, teaching me all the things I don't know. I don't know everything, right? You're just not born with this type of knowledge. It comes with experience, and you have to work hard to learn it, but it can be done if you are working with the right people. And what type of barriers have I faced? My gosh, all of them. In physics, it's 20% women, and even a smaller portion are women of color. So yeah, a lot of stories walking around the physics department at Harvard. A lot of people asking me, what are you doing here? What are you carrying? It's like, oh, I'm carrying nanomaterials for my experiments, or I'm going to the laser lab, or these are cancer cells. People would be shocked. What? You're a physicist? There's no way. You don't look like a physicist, because, scientists classically have this biased perception. They have this, they should be not very social, not very talkative, not women, not people of color. So I was always dealing with these implicit biases. And, I think biotech is unfortunately not that much different because there's not a lot of representation at the top stack of biotech. I think that needs to change for this industry to make equitable medicine. So that's definitely part of my agenda. But, it's a little bit about having honest conversations, whether it's with your team, whether it's with your investors, whether it's with the greater community of, hey, we all bring implicit bias to the table. That's just how it is. But how do we deal with it? It goes back to what Frank said, which was beautiful around inclusivity. We have to create a space where we understand where we're coming from and work on those differences to make progress. So it's a little bit like figuring out how we can be open to our fears and overcoming them together.
Awesome. You mentioned not being afraid to hear the word no, not being afraid to knock on all the doors. I'm curious, what gave you the confidence to do this? And if you had any advice for people who may struggle with that confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very selfish in terms of wanting to always live at the edge of my capacity. And if I'm not living at that edge, I'm a little bored. And that's how I got into physics, because it was the hardest thing for me in high school. It's like, oh, I need to do physics because it's harder and I want to grow. When you frame it as, okay, how can I be the best version of myself? What's intellectually curious for me? But it's hard. That's great. That means you're pushing yourself. That means you're growing into the best version of yourself. And failure is an inherent part of life. I've failed many times my whole life. I'm failing in some specific situation every week. But that's okay, because what's important is practicing self-awareness. How are you growing from that experience? How are you becoming better? How are you becoming stronger? And again, the other piece is, it's not personal. If somebody's acting a certain way towards you, it's not about you. It's mostly about them. So just keep that in mind. And I had a very intense situation on Monday, which was absolutely shocking from an implicit bias standpoint. But, it made me upset. I was upset for the evening. But then the next day I woke up and I said, well, it's not on me. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm doing the right thing. And that's what change is about. And sometimes when you're one of the first to do something, it's hard because you're having to break down a lot of barriers. But it's okay, and it's worth it because you're making it better for the future generations. And the US as a country, we're going to be not majority white anymore by 2045 is the expected date. So we got to work now, and I'm okay to take on some of that pain and suffering for the greater good of society.
Definitely. Another follow-up question. So I checked out Selena bio. They're doing a lot of really fun things. So I was curious what you think is the most fun part about your job, what's the most stressful part, and what part you didn't expect?
Oh, fun part. Fun part, working at the interface of multiple disciplines. It's so intellectually stimulating. So we live at the interface of stem cell biology, machine learning, and laser physics. I'm a laser physicist by training, but learned everything about biology the past 5 to 7 years of being in the space, and now learning a lot about machine learning. I love that. And then what were the other pieces, Jessica? Challenging and?
Yeah, the most stressful part, and then a part you didn't expect.
Oh, the most stressful part? Just the amount of work. I'm sure Frank and Aoife can relate. It's relentless. I don't have any free time. My brain doesn't switch off even when I'm asleep. So it's just nonstop, because as CEO, as your company evolves, you get more and more detached from the day-to-day activities. And you have to think about strategy, and strategy, you have to be very creative. Ideally, you aren't sleep deprived, but those things aren't always a possibility. And what surprised me, I think what surprises me is as my team grows and we become more and more established as a company, I feel like I have less and less time, which surprises me because I thought I might have more time, but when you're doing well, you actually have less time. So it doesn't ever really get easier. Other people might say that.
Thank you so much, Nabiha, for taking the time to share your wisdom and your stories. That was really inspiring and definitely resonated with me, and I'm sure a lot of other people on this call.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
Thanks so much to the interns. You all did an amazing job. Great job. And thank you, Frank, Aoife, and Nabiha, for taking time out of your really busy schedules to be with us today. Really inspiring to this cohort of students, and I hope you'll stay engaged with Project Onramp. I only wish we had more time to hear from each of you. So we touched on some really, really great topics. Thanks.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Moving right along, I see we have all of our industry volunteers on the Zoom. We'll move on to the second part of our program. Students, I hope you had a chance to look at the possible topics for the breakout rooms. If you don't have those in front of you, I think there's the questions document in the chat that my colleague Aoife has posted, and you can open that. Once you're in the breakout rooms, volunteers, please start off with introductions, and I encourage you to just talk about your career path, discuss any topics we outlined for you, take student questions, and just give students the benefit of your experience and your wisdom, your professional wisdom. At the end of 20 minutes, we'll bring you back to the main room and talk as a group here while we get the next round of breakout rooms ready. All right, Aoife, please feel free to deploy the breakout rooms when you're ready. Well, thanks everyone for doing that first session. We're just going to chat for a little bit until my colleague reassigns breakout rooms for the second and final session. But, you know, while we're here, I'm really interested to kind of know something that you learned in your first breakout room, something you talked about or was shared that you think maybe the whole group could benefit from. And I'd love for volunteers to speak up or students. Was there anything sort of interesting that you'd like to share with the group?
I'll give it a go here.
Yeah, great.
So one of the students asked me a fantastic question, which was about finding different paths, right? And we talked about how redefining goals and how we measure success is a key part of identifying new opportunities. So even though we might be going on track, let's say into our internships or our first jobs, it's finding the time to connect with people we normally wouldn't on our day-to-day to explore what other functions are undergoing in a project or in a company. So not only does it give you more perspective into what you're doing in terms of the larger picture of the company, but it might help you explore a path that you never would have thought of to do before.
Does anyone else sort of relate to that? Like, it's so daunting to think about sort of creating a career, whatever that means, you know, and just how you look at the big picture and look at the landscape and kind of about where you fit in.
Lila, I'll jump in. Hi, everybody. I'm Christiana Boizio from BMS. We had a kind of follow-on conversation from there, just talking about how you have to be comfortable expecting that there may be some transitions in your life and your career that you didn't expect, and being confident in making changes for whatever reason it is that's driving those changes. I've gone through a couple of pretty, 90-degree turns from where I thought I was headed, and they've always taken me to really wonderful places. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone I was speaking with understood that what you're doing now may be the thing you do for the rest of your life, but it may not be, and that's really okay. And it might lead in really great places.
I think that's totally true. It's my career. When I spoke to the group in the breakout session, is really non-traditional. My background's in math and physics, and I'm leading a chemistry, biochemistry group. Similarly, for my wife is also a scientist, did her PhD designing mass spectrometers, and now she's doing something completely different. And I think it's important to take those opportunities and not you know, it's great if you're passionate about something, but sometimes as you progress, things present themselves, they look really interesting, and there's nothing wrong with following them because they can take you to interesting places.
Yeah, I definitely second that. I think my career has taken many twists and turns, and within my group, we talked about the idea of, growth isn't always just, upwards. It's also kind of getting appropriate breath so that when the time comes, for the next, big role, you probably have more expertise than you even envisioned. So it's really open-minded as well. And then just to Liana's point, we talked about, how to network and what does it mean to network, and really who should be part of that ecosystem beyond your peers and your colleagues. You want to make sure human resources, it's really important. They're not just there to recruit you, but really help you think through development. You want to make sure your manager knows what you're working on, your boss's boss, and making sure that you also have an opportunity to really reach across the aisles to other areas that might interest you. So those are some of the things we talked about. And I'm Barbara from Moderna. Nice to meet you all.
I want to second that. My name is Jessica. I'm currently interning at Pure Tech. In the small group, we were talking about how to network, especially Zoom these days. And then one thing that we brought up is that we can just send out like an email to someone, a name that you see on all the emails that you receive, because probably the chance that if they are not my manager or in the direct group, I probably don't know them, but they end up being CC on the email anyway. Just why not send them an email, say, maybe, can we like Zoom for 10 minutes? It doesn't hurt if they don't reply. And then it would be great if we can get to talk. So I think it's kind of like a different way of doing networking while interning remotely.
Yeah, I totally agree. The team that I was speaking with, they were very interested in any tips about networking and ways to do that. And I encourage them just to reach out to other functions that might be even of the tiniest bit interest to them, or even not at all, but just to see how the company fits together, and ask people, just have a list of 3, 4, 5 questions that you can ask and just get a general idea of what they do in the company, how they participate, where they came from, and what was their kind of path to their position. And I encouraged, the students not to be shy at all. And it's like you have a unique opportunity right now in an internship. People are there to help you. The company that you're at has obviously already taken interest in promoting the next generation. So take advantage of it and reach out. You might get turned down a couple times, but you might get a couple of yeses.
Yeah, in my group, I actually mentioned to the students that in my experience, most folks in this close-knit life sciences community are very flattered to be asked to provide mentorship. They're very eager to share their experience. So while it may be intimidating, I've found over the years that I've never reached out and had someone not make the time and make the connection. So I think you'll find a more welcoming community than you might think.
Well, thanks everyone. This is a really fruitful discussion, and I kind of wish we could all keep talking as a small group, but we have our next round of breakout rooms ready. I want to tell students, if you are paired with somebody you've already spoken with, please leave that breakout room and come back to the main room and we will reassign you. And also I urge students to keep your cameras on as a matter of professional etiquette when you're with the professional in your small group. All right, Ife, you can deploy the breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. The time went really fast today. I'd love to thank all of our volunteers for being here. We really appreciate you taking time out of busy schedules to speak to students and share. Volunteers, please let us know, and you can even email me after the event if the students can reach out to you on LinkedIn or via email, and we'll be happy to share that information with students. Whether an intern is a sophomore thinking about choosing a major or a rising senior thinking about a career, it's so helpful to hear from people working in the industry. And interns, I know you only got to speak with 2 professionals today, but I hope you'll keep connecting, keep building those networks, because I'm sure you heard in all your breakout rooms that it's really a supportive network that will help you progress in your career and in your area of interest. I can't believe we're almost into August, which means we only have one Project Onramp event left, the Internship Showcase on August 18th. This is a celebration of the end of internships, and we're inviting supervisors and any friends of Project Onramp. All the volunteers today are welcome. And I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much. Thanks to my colleague Ife and to Treman from Bottom Line for helping with this session. And have a good day, everyone. Thank you.